Hello and welcome to Goose Live. I am your host, Charlie Stivers, also publisher of Goose Magazine. And in today's episode, we're going to be helping you prepare for the digital economy in regards to your credit. We're going to dispel all the myths, misconceptions, misinformation about credit and help you keep those scores up, monitor your credit, and watch out for the identity theft. So we're going to have some power-packed information. We got an expert here locally in the office. So we're changing things up and having fun here in the studio at the office. And you're going to want to dig in for this. It's going to be value packed, and we'll be right back after this video. All right, welcome back to Goose Live. Charlie Stivers here with special guests talking everything credit, ID, protection, preventing theft, all that good stuff. Kent Sauls, thank you for being a guest today on Goose Live.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Charlie. Thanks for having me. Real pleasure to get to talk to folks about what's going on in the credit world and help them and get them educated and continue to share like we do every day at the Credit Yetti. Try to get people to where they need to go with their goals and the credit that's so crucial to attaining everything that they want to do in their lives. So touches almost everything.
So we got to give a quick shout out to Achieve Systems. Kent and I have known each other for about 5 years, but got reacquainted through a local business and small business and entrepreneur development community called Achieve Systems. I'm going to share the URL. Basically, they are growing nationwide because of the value that they bring and attracting great business leaders like ourselves. And providing good value to consumers, information, a lot of free help too, which is important. And then, you hire people as you see a need. So they are actually having a local conference here in Denver, October 20, 21, 22. It's the third weekend of October, and they do them about every 4 months. So I really encourage you to check out the website. If you're open to traveling and listening to some great speakers, checking out some amazing vendors, networking like crazy. We're attracting tons of professionals, some millionaires around the country, a few around the world. And so it's going to be power-packed and a great weekend that you're going to want to attend. You can always reach out to me at hello@goosemag.com if you have any questions about it. But check out the website. Let's get into this.
Yeah. I was going to say there's joint venture opportunities with Achieve as well. And one of the networking groups that I'm involved with here in Denver is now in joint venture with them. And so lots of opportunities to grow and expand business-wise and make tons of connections. So there's a lot of networking going on here. It's very dynamic in the Denver market. So come and join us.
Yeah, the one thing I love the most is the abundance mentality. Yeah. There's all this cross networking, I call it cross pollination opportunities where we all get to grow, thrive, and have fun together. Yeah. All right, I'm going to give, we're also going to put up credityetti.com, and that's who we're featuring today. And let's get into it.
Right on. Thanks, Charlie.
Great. Yeah. So let's start out like I introduced. Maybe talk about some of these myths, misconceptions, misinformation out there that we need to straighten out first.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. Well, at the Credit Yetti, our moniker is that great credit is not a myth. So it's kind of fun. We use that Yeti image to kind of have a little fun with it, and it's not a myth, folks. I'll tell you, there's some interesting stories out there in the credit world, and I'll just start maybe with one that was a pretty dramatic illustration of what's possible. I was actually introduced to a car dealership manager up in Boulder, Colorado, who had been at a certain dealership. I won't give it away too much, but it was a certain dealership, and they were placed in a kind of a unique area in Boulder, which was pretty affluent. Okay, so there's some areas up there that are pretty affluent. So he had been in the car business for 20 some years in different locations in Denver, and he was used to dealing with a lot of customers that had subprime credit. So, he told me, he was kind of intimating to me, he said, we love seeing those subprime ones because we make more money off of that. I'm like, okay, interesting tidbit. But the point of me bringing it up was that he had a deal sitting on his desk as I was introduced to him. And, great car manager, he's able to do 5 things at once. So he was talking to me, talking to people coming in and out of the office doing deals. He had a deal in front of him to try to approve. But he made this comment, and it blew me away. I was not expecting it that day. He said to me, Kent, he said, this deal sitting right in front of me, I have their credit score right here. He said, this is the first credit score that I have seen in 3 weeks of being the manager at this facility that was under 800. Oh, wow. I was blown away. I said, I thought he was joking. I thought you're kidding, right? And he goes, no, this is the first one. And this one is the 796. So people do have great credit scores. And apparently there's a whole neighborhood full of them up in Boulder. So that's a pretty dramatic illustration of what's possible. And I say that hopefully you don't feel badly if you're not an 800 or is the high 7s, but that's what we do. That's where we come in, because that's a goal. We want to see you succeed. We want to see how high your scores can go based on what we do with our proprietary knowledge and the techniques we can employ and all that good stuff. And so part of it, like Charlie was saying a minute ago, part of it goes back to dispelling some myths, some street myths that people think they know what's going on, or they heard from somebody, this sort of thing. And one of them is that it's impossible to get into the 800s. Well, it's not. There's a whole community up there in Boulder, Colorado, that he was looking at for 3 weeks trying to buy cars off his lot, and they were in the 800s. So it is absolutely possible. We've done it many times. And sure, it takes some guidance, it takes some consultation, it takes some coaching from us to try to get there in a lot of cases, but there are a lot of different techniques we can use. So one myth is 800s are certainly attainable. It's not some pie in the sky thing that can't happen. I think the other thing too is that if you've made some mistakes, it's impossible to get out of it, and that's just not true. You might need some better advice, you might need some education and some guidance on it. And that's where the structure of our program comes in, because as you get engaged with what we do, we are right there with you every step of the way, because you have my cell phone number, you have my partner's cell phone number, who can take care of anything you need at any time. I love getting texts virtually anytime, day and night, because I just love taking care of these customers and what's going on with their credit. We're nationwide, from Florida to California, customers all the way in between. I'll tell you some more about some of those in a minute. But you have access to us. And then every 30 days, we have a set time to meet. And so whether we actually have that conversation or not, Some people love getting what I call an executive summary of their what's going on. I'll just give them an executive text and give them all the details. And sometimes, of course, that's the most efficient way to do it. But if they want a conversation, they've got it guaranteed every 30 days with us. So we're not just here throwing something on a computer and walking away and hoping it works. We're actually putting eyeballs on your stuff every 30 days at the very least. And if there are issues going on, there are things happening, then obviously we're going to stay on top of that as the month goes on. And anytime something pops up on your radar, if you have a question, just let us know. One of those myths that I think I want to address is the idea that you can kind of navigate the whole system just by what you might get from the bureaus and from other systems that I can name that are free out there. I just, boy, that is my nemesis, is that free information, because those places, those other websites, those other programs that are free to try to tell you something about your credit, supposedly, can be very, very misleading. So one of the things I'll say about it is that when you get one of those free services, and even something, and I can name this, of course, because most people, well, many people are aware of it. You can pay for updates from, say, Experian. You can do that. And some of the information they give is certainly helpful and informative and all that kind of stuff. Summaries of what your debt stuff looks like. Sure, it's good to see that. See which accounts are active, which accounts have debt involved, which accounts may have issues, whatever. That's good information. But when they pop those scores on there, even on Experian or some of the other free ones I can name, what they're doing is they're trying to get you to click. I mean, they're doing that for profit. They want you to try to be enticed into taking action that you may or may not be in your best interest. So that's, again, where we come in to try to make sure that everything we're doing is in your best interest. So that's where the discussion piece is very important. So, for instance, on those free services, a lot of times what they're drawing from is a FICO score. And then if you look really closely, you'll see there's this little tiny number up to the right-hand side of that number. So let's just pick a nice round number. Let's say you got a 650. And then you look up to the top to the right, and there's a little tiny number there, and it says 8. That means it's FICO 8. Well, that means there's at least 7 other FICO scores. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then you get 8. Well, they happen to pick FICO 8 because it's the most forgiving of the FICO scores. It will always be the highest. And it may or may not be an accurate reflection of what's actually going on with your credit. So, of course, what they're doing is they're manipulating you into thinking you have a 650 with a FICO 8. But little do most people know that if you were going for something serious like a mortgage or a car loan, they're not using FICO 8. And a lot of times what most mortgage companies are doing is they're using a combination. 2, 3, and 5. 3, 4, and 7. Sometimes they're pulling from FICOs that go into the teens, FICO 15. They're a whole set of FICOs. And that's where a lot of the confusion comes from about what those mean, how you're being scored on that system. And it's a lot more sophisticated than just pulling FICO 8 and telling you you're looking pretty good. Yeah, a lot of people look at that. That's we hear it all the time. People come, look, I'm a 650 on blah, blah website. Well, that may or may not be true when you actually go for the real deal and try to get a loan or try to get approved for a rental place, someplace to rent and live. And all of a sudden you see a 590 or a 610. And you're like, what happened? This one place said I was a 650. And I'd say, was it a FICO 8? Yeah, that's what happened.
So can you clarify that a little bit? We have Experian, Equifax, TransUnion.
Right.
Do all three of those make up the FICO or one of
Yeah.
the
Okay.
8?
So let's go into that explanation. And we have a presentation that goes into this too. So if we ever get a chance to redo another broadcast or if you get to one of our presentations, sometimes we've been able to present several different places. I was at the RE/MAX World Headquarters here in Centennial a couple months back, and I was being broadcast all over the world
Nice.
for Remax. It was sweet.
Congrats.
Stage had the monitor in front of me so I could see what was on the screen behind me. It was awesome. It was first class place. Anyway, it was kind of fun. But sorry, I rabbit trail. What was the question?
The makeup of FICO.
That's right.
Not FICA tax.
Yeah.
FICO
So let's back up a step and let's clarify something else that's kind of a myth, or people get confused. So your FICO score, which is the one that probably people are the name that most people are most familiar with, that has to do with credit that's formed because of major loans and monthly payments. So your FICO score has a lot to do with mortgages, of course, car payments. That's why people, rightly so, will tell you one of the best ways to build your FICO score is to pay off a car, but do it monthly. I mean, the monthly buildup is what builds up credit in the system and the algorithms. And by the way, that's another one that's just all algorithms. There's no one looking at your credit. I mean, in the olden days, we kind of had a little bit of more personalized, but way back in the 80s and 90s, someone could tell you something about it. Someone could do something about it over the phone. These days, of course, it's just completely nothing but algorithms. So we're playing a game with algorithms. So talk about the age of crypto and everything else. I mean, it's just a complete game with a bunch of algorithms. And that's how we just reverse engineer everything, so that by doing it day after day after day, working with clients, seeing what has an effect, what doesn't, what the effect is, how long it takes, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, there's our proprietary help that we provide. But you have your FICO scores that are tied to those monthly type of payments. Okay. So then but you also have a whole other category that a lot of people don't know this name, and it's your Vantage scores.
Haven't heard of that.
FICO and Vantage. Okay. So FICO's tied to those monthly payments mostly, but then the stuff on your Vantage side is usually tied to what's happening with your credit cards. Okay. So here's one of the explanations I want to get to today that hopefully is very helpful. So your FICO record and your Vantage record for scores are two different categories. They affect each other, but they don't necessarily correlate specifically. So oftentimes we'll see, let's go back to our FICO example, somebody saw a FICO score wherever it came from, and they're saying, well, my score is, now let's pick something a little more generous, let's say 750. And I'm saying, okay, that's what one source told you based on FICO 8, FICO 3, a combination of FICOs. Okay, that might be true, but then we go in and look at their Vantage scores, and the Vantage scores might be 680. There can be a wide disparity, and it's just all over the board. Sometimes your Vantage and your FICO scores line up, or they're close, 750, 740, 745. They're in the ballpark, and that's more typical than not. They're usually in a ballpark together. But there can be big disparities between the FICO and the Vantage scores. And so that's where things get confusing, things get frustrating, because somebody thinks they're a certain score based on a FICO or based on a Vantage score. They may not even know the difference between the two. And then they're making financial decisions based on that without seeing the whole picture. The big picture with both FICO and Vantage scores. So again, that's where we come in, because that's part of what we're educating on. And when we look at the reports on, and now I'll just go ahead and start talking about what we use, if that's all right.
Yeah.
We use a very specific company that we have vetted now for several years. We continue to vet the companies all the time that can provide you with accurate credit information for a reasonable cost. Again, the free ones, stay away.
You're selling our info.
What's that?
They're selling our info.
Well, yes, exactly. They're selling info. They're playing the game with all the info share stuff. And so we have a company that has several key aspects to it. And if you can find another one, let us know, because if anybody's doing this, we want to know about it. But the only one we know of that doesn't info share, that is on month-to-month contract instead of a long-term commitment contract, and doesn't sell your information or advertise. So they're not trying to entice you to do something about applying for credit or credit cards or loans, predatory loans, all that kind of stuff. The only company we know of is called, write this down, and this is worth the price of admission today, Identity IQ. Identity IQ. That's the company. That's the only company we recommend using. I'll explain for a couple of reasons why. So Identity IQ, we actually run a special with them. We're partners with them, and they will give us a link. They give us a link for $1 for 1 week of complete access. And what that provides you with is an extremely organized presentation of your credit information. Okay. When you order those free credit reports from the bureaus, again, Experian, Equifax, TransUnion, yes, you can get a free one once a year. You're entitled to that by law. The Fair Credit Reporting Act, does have certain good qualities to it. We cite that all the time in our dispute letters. But anyway, I'll talk about that more in a minute. But when you get that mass of papers, if you've ever ordered one, you get like 20 pages, double-sided. It's a complete mess. I mean, it really takes me to have to concentrate on what I'm looking at. When people bring that to me, I'm like, okay, lot easier to read on Identity IQ. Color-coded, columned, labeled, explained, and they are completely thorough in all of the details of your credit history, and that includes several different aspects of it. Number one, first thing we always check when we look on Identity IQ is we try to make sure that your name on the bureaus is consistent. So you're not, you're not Kenneth on one of them and Ken on another and KT on another. That your address, your primary address, is consistent across the board. Most people have moved many times in their life, and that stuff sometimes can cause problems with identifying who you are. You go to apply for a credit card, you've got 3 different addresses on there as your primary. It probably gets you turned down, even though your scores are fine. It's crazy. So, but that's an algorithm picking up on a specific piece of information. So we check that first. So your identity, your address, all that kind of stuff is on there right at the beginning. Make sure that's accurate and up to date. Then they give you a breakdown, actually, of how many positives and negatives you have in total. They'll tell you the total number of accounts you've ever had in your life, total. Most people are in the 20s, 30s, 40s, that kind of thing, depending how old they are. Some get into the 50s and 60s in total number of accounts. And guess what? They're all listed on Identity IQ, every one of them from your whole life. And what's powerful about that is that Identity IQ is taking their information. They are linked to the 3 major bureaus, again, Experian, Equifax, TransUnion. They take their information from there. They reorganize it so that you can more easily read it than getting the big report we just referred to. Color-coded, column, labeled, all the whole thing. So they're drawing on the information that the algorithms are using to make decisions about your score and hence your eligibility to be able to access credit or loans or money or with the coming social score. That's going to be all part of it too, as to whether you're the right type of person to get a car loan from a certain company, get a house loan from a certain bank or company, so that's another layer here. But making sure your stuff's accurate and being able to see all and every account you've ever had, because it could be an account that's been closed for 10 or more years that's damaging your credit today. And you wouldn't know unless you have that degree of detail in a report that's understandable, readable, accessible. And if you use the service beyond the $1 for 1 week that we have for you to do the 30-minute free consultation on this. But if you access the service, you've got that information at your fingertips by computer 24/7. It's on, anytime you need to check anything. So that becomes important once you start to go into our programs and try to see the changes, what's happening on a weekly or monthly basis. I'll explain more about their timing on Identity IQ here in just a minute. Anyway, so they have all the information up front. Check that. We have the totals of what's going on with your credit, whether you've got how many delinquents you have, how many lates you have, and all that kind of thing. It also gives you the positives. You've got this much in good standing, all that kind of stuff. Total debt is on there, all that kind of stuff. So it gives you all that stuff. Then it goes into all the specific accounts that you've ever had in your life. The latest ones tend to be at the top of the report, so you can get to the stuff that's probably most relevant to whatever you're doing now right away. See that stuff at the top. But then it also goes down all the way through your complete total history of every account you've ever had that had to do anything with credit or loans. Okay, so then it gives all of that. But then below that, there's a category for if you've ever had a bankruptcy. And it gives the particulars of it. In other words, what day or time, the exact date it was discharged from the court. That date becomes very crucial to making decisions about anything you're doing with your financial and especially credit world. You can start to recover credit and get, for instance, credit cards just a few months after a bankruptcy. Most people don't know that. So yes, you can start to rebuild right away, but you have to make the right decisions about which cards you're applying for. And we need to see the rest of what's gone on in your history. So there's a lot to consider, but the good news is you could start to build right away almost after a bankruptcy. And then all these little particulars, like whether it was chapter 11 or chapter 7 bankruptcies, that matters. It has an effect. We could talk about that, but I won't get into all that right now. But anyway, we can see it on Identity IQ. And those particulars become very important to any decision making. Then you go to the next category, and this is really cool. It shows all of your inquiries for the past 2 years. And that's a reflection of how the Fair Credit Reporting Act works, is that they stay on for at least 2 years. Then they naturally fall off. Okay, so that the good news is they will fall off, but the total number that you have has a big effect, of course. Most people know about this, that a lot of inquiries is not a good thing in terms of your scores. It affects it. So an inquiry, typically a hard inquiry, will drop your score 3 to 7 points. It's not horrible, but if you start accumulating a bunch of them, then that starts to become a factor in the overall strength of your score and where it's at. And here's a little tip for the day. This is another freebie worth the price of admission. If you're going to go for a car loan, my best advice for you is to go qualify for that car loan at your local credit union, small bank, or small bank. Okay? Before you ever walk into a dealership or strike a deal, even if it's online these days. Make sure you know how much you can qualify for and at what rate, and then also get the breakdown of how many years you want to go, so that determines how high your payment is, right? Because when you go to a dealership, and I don't care what they say with their mouth, when you go in there, they're going to reassure you they're only going to do one inquiry. That's not true. They're going to hit the button once, but their button at the dealership is going to give you, I've seen anywhere from 10 to 20 inquiries on one push of a button. It's all because they want to be able to say, and it would be a truth, they're not lying about this part, that I got you the lowest interest rate I could. Well, yeah, because you pushed a button and it went out to 10 to 20 banks. Yeah, you did get the lowest interest rate, but it probably only made a difference of a quarter point. They're all within a very close range of each other. They're all competing against each other. They just want to be able to say at the dealership, look like good guys and gals who got you the lowest interest rate. Well, it wasn't worth 10 to 20 hits on your. So here you go. You get into a car deal. You let them run your credit, which, by the way, they do not have to do to quote you a number on the sale of the car. They say they do. They're not totally lying to you. Because if they want to find out, if they can get you a decent rate,
Pre-qual.
Sure, a pre-qual, sure, they're doing that. But you can take care of all that before you ever walk into a dealership or or make a deal with anybody online. And usually the credit unions, local credit unions, local small banks will have the best rates. They're competing even more for your business, of course. That's why they're small banks. So go local for your car bank loan, and don't let a dealership hit you for 10 to 20 inquiries in one swipe of a stroke of pushing a button. So that's my best advice there. That's the tip of the day. So that's all on there. Shows all your inquiries. We would know about those. We typically, when we do dispute letters for other things on the report, we'll usually throw in a few dispute letters for your oldest inquiries on that 2-year spectrum. And sometimes we can get them off before the 2-year fall off point.
So maybe back up just a bit and talk about how, yes, a lot of this stuff is DIY, but there's a consistency element to this and a lot of work that's involved. And that's where you guys come into play, right?
Yeah, we do all the dirty work. You know, I mean, you don't want to have to write all these letters to all, because every time, let's say you have let's just say you take a negative, you got a delinquency on something, you have 30-day late payments, 60-day, 90-day, whatever. Well, that gets reported to all 3 bureaus. So that means you've got, for one issue that was created, you've got 3 separate letters to send to 3 different bureaus. So times 3 everything. If it's a negative, it's times 3, because you need to address it with all 3 bureaus. And then, of course, the issue is, how do you address it? What do you say? And we cite the Fair Credit Reporting Act. That's part of how we know to do that. And I'll give you this tip. You can do this yourself. You know, we do it all the time, but if you want to address it yourself, you can find these form letters on the internet. You can find out what to say for the most part. But the key is, like we do on the first round, we're always doing certified mail. Certified mail obligates the receiver to respond by law. You know, you've heard about this with, you know, whatever, personal matters and negotiations and divorces and all kinds of stuff. So certified letter is delivering to them officially. You now have to respond by law. You have to give a response. Okay. So, and that's part of how we get effects, positive effects on credit ASAP once you engage with us. That first round going out will be certified mail. Okay, so to finish off with Identity IQ, the last category that's in that particular part of their program is also really crucial sometimes. And what that is it's a summary of every company that's listed above, but it gives it in a summary form with their contact information. So name of the company, address of the company in case they need to be written to, and the phone numbers. So part of what we do is help people understand, hey, you need to call this company and you need to ask for thus and such to be taken off, and here's why. If you have to do a negotiation for a collection, then you have a number to call and you have someone you can contact, and we help you with the script on that. You have to do it yourself because they're going to identify who you are, of course, if they're talking about any kind of type of collection on a debt. So, but anyway, we'll help you, set you up for success on that situation. But my point is, that's the amount of detail you get with Identity IQ. And you do not get that with those free services. And in fact, what happens with those free services, what I've seen now after doing this for 3 or 4 years, is that people start to look at it like a football game. Well, today, thus and such company said I'm a 670, and that went down from a 680 yesterday. And then everybody gets all dramatic about it. What's going on? What's happening? This and that. And they're looking at it like it's the score of a football game. Well, Identity IQ solves that by slowing you down a little bit and getting you to take a breath. Identity IQ only updates every 30 days. That causes everybody involved making decisions about it to slow down for a second and allow things to take place, and especially if they're on the positive spectrum. So, for instance, you engage with us. We send out a round of certified letters. Anything positive in the system is going to take time. We all know how fast the negatives hit. That's how they've designed the system against us. You get a delinquent, you're going to see it. Your score is going to drop within 2, 3, 4 days. You'll see that almost instantly, so to speak. But in order to correct it, it may take 30, 60, 90 days of doing the right thing. And that's why we slow it down. So we always say we do not look at any of those free services. I don't like to use Experian service because those scores are deceptive. They're trying to get you to do something else that's going to cost you in the long run. So we slow down. That's why we meet every 30 days. We wait for the update from Identity IQ because we know that that is completely and totally accurate. And it's not trying to get you to make a decision about another credit card, another loan, slow down. Let's let the system have its effect. And especially while we're doing positive things, it takes time. Let it sink in. Let the algorithms do their job, because eventually, by law, they have to do the right thing and tell you if there's a positive improvement. But we want to make sure it's accurate, because the next decision off of that needs to be accurate as well. So it is a process. It does take some patience. You do have to kind of have a long game mindset when you start to correct things on your credit and try to build your credit, which is the other aspect of what we do. It's not just credit restoration, as it's been called, cleaning up negatives. Sure, absolutely. But it's also building your credit with the right chess moves to get it to go in the right direction and to build your credit depth and strength. Depth and strength. You know, typical idea would be, like a typical illustration would be, got a 20-year-old who's got a 720, and they go in to get a car loan, which, by the way, they should get a car loan in their own name. That's usually our advice. Don't do it in the parent's name. Get it in your own name, because you're going to start to build your own credit. But they've maybe had one credit card they were responsible with. They've never had a car loan, never had a house loan, obviously, that type of thing. And they get turned down. Credit depth, credit strength, credit history. So, you know, that's where we start to talk about adding them as an authorized user.
This is a big tip.
This is a big tip. Authorized user space, very powerful. And it's the only legal way to throw rocket fuel on scores. So the 20-year-old who doesn't have much depth, doesn't have any history, they do want to get the car loan in their own name if there's any way possible. But that's why that one positive of the system is that credit cards typically these days, and there is one company who stopped doing it right now. It's interesting. But most credit cards you can put your kids on as authorized users. You can do it as early as 18 years old. And I highly advise you to do it as long as, this is what we check on Identity IQ, even for parents. That's why we have to see it. You have to have perfect payment history for 2 years. You have to have a low balance average, preferably below 10%. Right? Those two factors have to be in place in order for that authorized user, the kid's name being put onto your card, in order for it to have a positive effect and have a dramatic effect. If you're running that credit card at 60, 70, 80, 90% usage, don't put them on. Because now that debt looks like their debt. Anything that's on there looks like it's theirs. And once it goes on the record, it's on the record. I mean, just like all I just talked about with Identity IQ, when you put somebody on authorized user, it's on forever. That account will show basically forever. I mean, it can fall off after many, many years, but typically they stay on for a long time, for years and years. The typical number is past 7 years. But I've seen accounts stay on for 10, 12 years, 14 years. There's some old accounts on. That's another thing we clean up anyway. But that authorized user trick is what we do. We have a whole program of authorized user where we have an inventory of cards from trusted family, friend, and clients that we know what they're not really using those cards, those extra cards. So we provide a way to provide them with passive income, because we'll split the commission with them.
I've heard about
and we
this.
can sell that space safely, anonymously. Nobody gets any cards. Nobody knows anything except their name, and magically that card magically appears with that available credit space onto their credit. And like I said, it's part of their permanent record. It looks like to the algorithms you qualified for that card. So if you've got a $15,000 Chase card and you only use it for a tank of gas every 2 months, perfect. And we can sell that user space to somebody who needs it to help build their credit in the shortest amount of time possible. There is no comparison to using authorized users to build somebody's score. It's a huge, huge tool in order to do it. I'm just praying to God they don't take it away. There's one credit card company that has taken it away here recently. So, and we all know things are changing in the economic situation with credit, but I'm praying that still remains as an access point for people who need to build credit, not only for, kids and families, great, super, but we're able to do it with adults. And so that's our authorized user program. Available space, sell it. And if you are a person who has some credit cards or wants to get some credit cards under the right consulting from us, we can tell you based on, again, looking at identity IQ, the specifics on your credit history, where your scores are at, what the depth and strength is, tell you whether you could qualify for a Chase card or a Wells Fargo or Bank of America or not. So there's a lot of factors that go into that as well. We take a look at that, assess it. But if you want to get cards you could actually use to make passive income, or we could use it in the authorized user program, we can advise you on that, and you can become a part of it. And we literally split the commission. The commission is based on 10% of what the customer is buying. So if they need $10,000 added to their credit, they pay 1/10 of that one time. So 1/10 is $1,000. And to me, it's the best investment you could possibly make to build your credit. There is no other way to do it like this.
And how many multiples of users do credit card companies allow?
They allow up to 2 on a card.
Okay.
So when we get a card in the program, we could have 2 buyers on a card, 2 separate buyers, 2 completely different strangers to each other on that card. And that would give double commission to the person who is selling that card to us for use. So when we charge $1,000, we split the commission. We'll take $500 for managing the program and to pay us for our time and effort, and we'll give the other $5 to the customer in 2 payments. One when we sign somebody onto your card, so in that case it would be $250. And then once they are cycled off of the card at about the 5th or 6th month of being on, then you get the other half of the commission.
So in some of the cases like that, will you, if you have a prospective card buddy, will you say, hey, your line of credit is only $10,000. You could probably qualify for 15 or 20. Do you kind of work with them to do that too?
Absolutely. And again, that's where people who want to be on the authorized user program as a seller for a passive commission, we want to do the same thing we do with everybody and take a look at what they have on Identity IQ to make sure of the strength and the history. So if you've got the right strength and history, our advice might be, hey, you need to call Chase as an example and ask them to bump up your available credit usage on that card. Now, remember, the tip of the day again is you need to use those cards, and we just say either get a tank of gas or groceries and just pay it off right away that week. Once it comes on, just go pay it off, $100, $200, whatever, and keep it active because they do shut down inactive cards.
I have heard of that.
Yes, they will shut that down or drop the usage. So maybe you had $10,000 card and all of a sudden they drop you to $4,000. So, and that's due to lack of activity. Yeah. So we just say gas and groceries. I mean, that's our educational management point, right? For people, just get gas and groceries, something you're going to spend money on anyway. You're going to spend money on gas and groceries. So put it on the card. That's one of those credit management strategies. Put it on the card. And then just set a reminder for yourself in your calendar or whatever, and just say by Friday, pay it off. Yep. And when you do that also with your cards, by the way, on the monthly cycle on payments on cards, the other tip I can give you, just self-help, is that if you can pay it before the interest charge is cycled onto it, usually at about the mid or 2/3 of the way through the month, about 10 days before your payment is due. If you can pay that off before that point, or even make 2 payments, let's just say you got to tank gas, you owe $100. pay 50 that week and pay 50 the next week, and they're both before the cycle of the card cycling for the month to get the interest charge on it, number one, you avoid the interest charge. But it also looks like you made 2 payments, and the algorithms pick up on the fact that you zeroed it out. That's a positive.
Yeah.
That's worth a point or two. And you keep doing that month after month after month after month. That's another way to build your credit without having to spend any money. I mean, you're spending it on the gas and the groceries, but you don't have to pay us to help you or any other thing to help you out. You're just that's good credit management. Now, of course, that takes some diligence and somehow organizing and to remind yourself to do that. But the more cards you do that with, it just multiplies the effect so that your scores are building by you just having good credit habits. But that's where I'm an advocate of having credit cards. It's not for everybody, but it is necessary for some folks in a lot of different ways. And I'm kind of opposite of Dave Ramsey on that. He says to never borrow money. And I'm not a big believer in that in this modern day and age. I mean, sure.
That's why you're here, man. I agree. We're a credit driven economy, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I mean, hey, if you have trouble paying bills consistently, the discipline piece of that is good. What Dave's trying to teach, put it in the envelopes, whatever. Organization, great. Good habits, fantastic. We promote good habits. So I just talked about it. But boy, credit cards, if you know how to manage credit cards, man, you can do some cool things with your credit and build depth and strength like I've been talking about. And that's crucial when you go for the big stuff. You go for the SBA. You go for the house loan. You go for the second house loan. You go for the investment property.
HELOC.
All that stuff is a factor now. And the more strength and depth you have in the right way on your credit, the more they're going to say yes. So,
or being a real estate investor.
Yeah.
So we have about 10 minutes left. 2 things come to mind. If they're not that big of a deal, maybe you have some other ideas to discuss. One is maybe some quick tips and tricks on people with bad credit that they can maybe work on and form better habits. And the other one too is this whole game with points and credit cards.
Yeah. Any
kind of good points you want to make with that?
Let's address the idea of perks on cards. So there are still some pretty good perks out there. Like Southwest card is a good example, right? You can build up some points for flights and that sort of thing. What the trend has been, of course, over the last it cycles, but over the last 3 or 4 years has been they've been taking that away. As interest rates have gone up, there aren't as many perks anymore, and you really have to search them out. And then, of course, there was that whole trend from probably 6-7 years ago where because of the internet, there were a few people who were really taking advantage of all these things you could do. And then they started kind of shutting them down, right? Because they realized people could actually out manipulate them and get even more perks, right? They were really people flying for free, buying stuff. So they're still out there, but they're harder to find. And there's usually, reading the fine print is really important because, again, they're out to make money and they don't want you to have too much advantage over them on anything that they're offering. Yeah. A lot of it's just a tease these days, but there are some. Yeah, for sure. There are. And there's certain things like one of the Chase cards has protection for if you're traveling internationally and money is stolen or anything fraud over there, they actually cover that. So there's things like that are also advantages, let alone just straight up points, which equals dollars or whatever. But coverage for international travel is one of those things on several cards that might be an advantage or something you want to have. So you just have to read the fine print. You have to do some research. We could point people in the right direction, but I usually leave that up to the customer because it gets into the fine print sometimes. And I can't keep up with it all, but at least we could give you the general direction, some thoughts about it, and you can research it yourself and find out what you need and want. Okay. Then what was the second question?
So as far as tips and tricks go, I like how you said, if you pay 2/3 through the month. Another one that I've heard is if someone's in a position where they are having to make the minimum payment plus $5.
Yeah.
Something like that. Any other simple ones?
Yeah, exactly. Because exactly what you're saying is true. What do the algorithms pick up on? They categorize, of course. And so one of the categories is if you're just making the bare minimum payment, it gets picked up in the algorithm that way. Oh, you're barely doing this, right? Like you're just making the minimum. So yes, I always tell people if you can add money to it, $5 more or whatever. But see, it goes back to what I said about previously. If you take that $5 or $10, even $5 or $10, and you pay it mid-month before it cycles, and then add $5 to your minimum payment, it's not a huge difference, but the algorithms do read it differently, and it has a positive effect. So those are the little things you can do along the way, especially if you're in a position where you're doing minimum payments on something. The other thing about minimum payments is this, and this is where we get into a lot of refined consulting with people is, should I pay this off or not? Yeah. So, and
or which one first?
Yes. And so there is that strategy some people have heard about, but I'll say it now, to do a debt snowball. So just like the idea of how a snowball, rolls downhill and gets bigger and bigger as it goes. Of course, you start with a small one, you pay that off first, and then you go to the next one is bigger. So that's what the analogy is. But it also does depend on the rest of the picture. Because you've also got those ratios on debt where when it hits certain ratios, percentages of use of debt, you could also be at an advantage. So without having a graphic illustration here, let's say that you're making $1,000 a month on minimum payments. It'd be kind of extreme, but it does happen, of course. Has happened to a lot of us. So am I better off? I sell a car, or I make a sale, or I get a bonus or whatever. So am I better off paying one off? And I'd say, okay, depends. Let's take a look at what you have. Because if we could make 3 payments out of that and get 3 cards under 30% usage, that's more of a positive effect. Always positive to pay off debt. Don't get me wrong. Always positive to pay off debt.
Strategy.
But there's a strategy to it. And it depends on the particulars of your situation. And that's why we need to see those details, like I talked about it in something like Identity IQ, so that we can look at it and assess it relatively quickly, because it's way better organized than getting the report from the bureaus. And that's just, seeing the specifics on it is so important. And then having our eyeballs on there with your eyeballs, and then to say, well, do you see how, if you split that up and did 3 different payments on these 3 cards, you're going to put everything under 25. And now your scores are going to jump because it looks like you're making serious progress on 3 accounts instead of just 1, because the others were still over 30%. So people don't know how the algorithms pick up on that kind of thing. That's one of those subtleties about it. That's why it's so important to be able to see the whole picture, and let us help you with advice on that.
That was really good. So one of the other things that I've noticed, I think in the last 2 years, you can now add your utility bills to your credit report.
Yeah.
Why don't you address some of the...
Yeah, you bet. It can be a good thing to do that, to add the utilities and stuff to your payment history. But when it goes wrong, it's a big hit. It's a big negative. And so there's so much detail to keeping up with that, because you put a utility on a certain card or a certain debit card or something like that. And then the obvious example here, you can tell where I'm going, is that card gets changed, or you have identity theft on that card and you have to get a new card. Well, now you've got all those payments tied to that card. So now, unless you're very diligent about which accounts you had and when you put them on there and when you're going to put the new one on, something is very likely to go wrong, go south. And so the few points that might have been enhanced and positive in your favor by doing the utilities, it's very minimal. It's not the same as having a credit card that you're using responsibly. It's not the same at all. It's not equivalent. They don't tell you that. And again, it's not a lie. It's a positive to report that you paid your electric bill on time every month for 12 months. But the minute that, again, the confusion of you move, you get a different card for some reason, and all of a sudden you forget, and now that goes 30 days late or 60 days late. You didn't pick up on it, and all of a sudden your scores drop in 30, 40, 50, 60 points. And the other thing about dropping scores because of a negative is that you never get those points back unless you do something dramatic like an authorized user program, because it just doesn't replace automatically. It's not a ratio that you can count on to rebuild those points. So you lose, 40, 50, 60, 70 points on something negative. You can't get all that back by just making on-time payments for 10 years. You've got to do something to build credit. And that's where authorized user space, when we do the piece I didn't talk about. So when we put somebody on authorized user, and it looks like we added 10,000, 15,000, 20,000. Just had a customer yesterday, single mom, 4 kids trying to get into a house. We gave her 22,000. She paid for less than that. We had card combinations that took her up to 22,000. Okay, so when we do that, we put you on there for 4 to 5 months until your scores go up dramatically. I mean, it's 50 to 100 or more points. It's crazy good. When that happens, now we have to get you, depending on your scores, to go and apply for the proper recommended cards. You can't just go out and get a Chase Inc. We got to tell you which ones to go for so that you get cards in your name, so that now you're building your own credit. And when we take you off of those AUs that you purchased, it holds your score with your credit. Now it's your credit that you built. And usually then the next step is going to be, now you went from a 620 to a 720. We take you off of the AU that you bought. Your scores hold in the 7s. And now we say, now you're eligible for this card.
That's cool.
And now we continue to build. Or you maybe want to go for an SBA with your LLC or whatever, your EIN, all that kind of stuff. Now you're in position to do that, or go for a business card, go for a Chase Inc., go for something else, Spark, whatever. It's all building on itself, either positive or negative. And that's where our proprietary knowledge, can make all the difference in the world.
Wow, you nailed it there. And actually, you bring up a good point there towards the end about building business credit. Unfortunately, we're out of time today, but we can always have you back, which is amazing. So really appreciate super valuable tips and things you can take action on. Also, bad credit or good credit, you have a reason to call this guy. So Kent Sauls with CreditYetti.com. I'm going to put this up one last time. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Catch us next week on Goose Live, and we'll have some more value-packed information for you. And check out Goose Magazine at goosemag.com as well. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you later.
Thanks, Charlie.